Welcome to the Team Teach podcast. I'm Clare, and in each episode you'll find me talking with an expert guest to learn more about behaviour. We squeeze a lot into each episode. You'll listen to the latest thinking in behaviour, continue your professional development with our book recommendation, and then I'll send you away with 3 practical tips you can use in your setting. Well, hi Richard. I'm really happy to have you here today. We're joined by Richard Fisher, and we're talking about restorative conversations that inform behaviour support plan reviews. To start us off, Richard, would you mind telling the listener a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Morning, Claire. So my name is Richard Fisher, as you've said. I'm currently principal trainer with Team Teach. I have my background's education. Worked in education for probably the last 27, 28 years, both in the UK and in Australia, predominantly in the field of supporting students with additional support needs. So in the UK, worked in mainstream high schools as pastoral leader, head of year, transitioned to a special school for students with emotional and behavioural difficulties in the UK, which really ignited my passion for looking at behaviour support and how best to support students. And then we emigrated over to the UK, to Australia, and then I've worked predominantly with students with disabilities. So predominantly leadership roles, head of special education services in big high schools, deputy principal in special schools, culminating in the last 14 years as principal of 2 special schools on the Sunshine Coast here in Queensland. She's been fantastic.
Yeah, what a like varied career spanning different countries, different roles. So I'm sure we're going to have a really engaging conversation about this topic. And we like to start off the podcast asking a reflective question. So what you wish you knew then that you know now about restorative conversations to inform behaviour support plans?
Well, it's a great question. I suppose for me, probably when I came through the system, it was a bit of a sink or swim scenario. You either could do it or you couldn't do it. And I think for me, just having that knowledge, some of the really key knowledge around some of the key models around behaviour support would have been really ideal for me. There was lots of trial and error, and when you're dealing with human beings and human beings who present have got their own complexities in their own lives, that can really damage relationships. And thankfully you learn quickly. But I think that those knowledge of what the restorative conversation would look like, the whys behind it, what positive behaviour support looks like, what the whys behind it, different stages of distress and different strategies. I think there was lots of learning around, especially moving from a mainstream environment. And Claire, probably I was in the system many years ago where it was the advice was don't smile before Christmas, and certainly there wasn't that great emphasis on building relationships, creating a real positive culture. It was around compliance to rules and regulations of school. So moving to the school with students with a bit of emotion and behavioural difficulties, having that understanding of trauma would have been really vital for me, and probably I did it quite naturally, and I was one of the lucky ones. But having that real strong theory background, I think, would have really helped me in my early career. So I've certainly learned through trial and error. Learn quickly, because you have to learn quickly on occasions. But developing those skills proactively rather than reactively probably would have been my biggest reflection on my career.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, particularly in the topic of restorative conversations, where that's kind of all based on that element of student voice and young people, children, or anyone really having a bit of agency and a chance to be heard. But it's interesting you reflecting on your early career, where it's more that kind of compliance-based approaches and that need maybe to have the knowledge then. But I suppose we do kind of have the knowledge now and the theoretical underpinnings around the benefits of restorative conversations.
Did
Did you know that you can become a trainer and deliver Team Teach training to staff within your own organisation? Have the flexibility to choose when, where and who you deliver your training to throughout the year. Find out more about this cost-effective option on the Team Teach website. Maybe it would be good to define what we mean by restorative conversations, because I do think that it can mean maybe different things for different people, because I wouldn't say that there's kind of one strict definition of it, but maybe that would help us to, get our path for the episode.
And it probably means, different things at different times, but I suppose predominantly for me, the restorative reflection or conversation is around, when we do this, what is the impact on other people? What is the impact on relationships? What is the impact on other people? When you did this, how did that make me feel? Or how did that impact other people? So rather than looking at it from a compliance or a consequence lens, looking at it from a, when we do this, what is the impact of what's the impact on other people? And that's how I've always used it. And certainly that's a really important part of that, trying to develop those skills with our students or our clients around, when you do this, what's the impact on other people, and not from a right or wrong perspective, but from a looking at it with a relational lens. That's how I've always used it. And then looking at that feedback loop around, okay, and if you feel or if you feel like this next time, what's the plan? And that's the key bit. What's the learning involved in it? So trying to look at it really objectively and saying, okay, next time this happens, what can we do? What can you do? What can I do to support you if that happens again? So that's how I've always used it. It might be slightly different with different people, but from my perspective, that restorative conversation is a learning conversation. My belief is that, if students or clients, from a student perspective, if a student makes a mistake in maths, we'll reteach that 20 times, 30 times, however many times that's required for to support that student. But when it comes to behavior presentations, I think sometimes we have less tolerance around that because of the impact that it has on other people. So I just see it as another learning opportunity, and I think the restorative or the reflection piece is really critical for that.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting comparison, that when it comes to learning, if we're talking about students, that there is this model, in education, that we repeat to learn kind of, from our mistakes. And then actually with behavior, sometimes it's just kind of, it's done. Maybe there's a consequence in some systems and then it's kind of forgotten about. But I think for me, that part that you were saying there, Richard, about kind of learning the different way to be, or learning how other people think and feel, is such an important part of the restorative conversation or restorative practices. And I'm wondering if you've experienced this as well. I think in different services, it can become like a rote activity. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that well, but
oh, absolutely. And I think that the key is the expertise in guiding that conversation down avenues that that we want to support people in, because people don't pick up those skills easily, and sometimes we have to explicitly teach. When I feel like this, these are the strategies that we can use. When we're feeling anxious, or when we're feeling sad, or when we're feeling angry. And I think there's also there's a danger of us for expecting students not to feel angry, not to feel sad, or clients, and we go through those experiences every day, all day, every day. But and that explicit teaching around what that actually feels like, and what it is we can actually do when we feel in that state, then I think it's absolutely critical that we can sometimes explicitly teach that, or we can coach that. And some young people will need coaching around that and be able to come up with some solutions themselves. Some of our young people will need explicit teaching around that initially. Well, when this happens, you could try this. So again, that there's no one size fits all around restorative conversations. I think it's the journey of the restorative conversation is the important point, not the actual end result often, but providing some systematic approach to that. So providing time for the conversation is absolutely critical, making sure that that's a really important part of the process. And I've been guilty of it in my leadership positions of the post-incident learning is often the bit that gets forgotten. And I think that's absolutely critical, that maybe the systems approaches that we provide time for it, what that looks like can be very dependent on the young person. It can be very dependent on the incident, and it can be very dependent on the person who's implementing or supporting the restorative conversation. So I think the journey part of it is often the learning, and there is some process driven stuff, Claire, because we work with people with additional needs. So there may have to be some sort of process around what that could look like, but the delivery needs to be a little bit flexible as well. So I think you're absolutely right. The same set of 4 questions after an incident probably doesn't work for everyone. But making sure that I think often the actual opportunity to sit and reflect for the young person after an incident, but the opportunity to reflect as a practitioner or as a teacher or as a support worker, that bit often gets missed, because that's the challenging bit for us, is that reflecting on an incident, we often reflect on what the student can do or the young person can do differently in the future, but we don't have to reflect on what we can do differently. And as adults, we find that really challenging, and that's a really important part of the process as well.
It is, and again, that's an interesting comparison, because actually, if we think about restorative conversations, what we're asking of children, young people, service users, we're asking quite a lot, aren't we? You might have to talk about kind of really how you feel about the situation, how you potentially impacted other people, and how I mean, we wouldn't label it like this was a mistake, but essentially that person has to sort of take ownership that perhaps they could have done something differently, or they might try to do that. And then it's interesting as practitioners that we find that hard, and it's always a learning curve. I know I think about when I was maybe in my 20s and first starting my job, not quite in education then. And I remember making mistakes in that work, and it was almost impossible to admit that I'd made a mistake. Like the shame, like I'd just be bright red. I'd be like sleepless nights. I'm like, I can't admit that I've done this wrong. I'm going to have to cover it up or whatever. Cut to being in my 40s now. I'm like, yeah, I made a mistake. I'm going to do that differently. Like I'll take ownership of that. But it's definitely a skill. Like I really know that from a personal note. That is a skill that we learn, repeat, and kind of keep going with.
Yeah, and I think that's the important of the process side of it. I know that from before is that understanding and developing that if something does happen, there is going to be an opportunity to an expectation of reflection for the young person. But there is going to be an opportunity and an expectation for reflection from the person supporting the young person as well. And I think we often have what's the word I'm looking for? We often have different expectations of the young person. In fact, often higher expectations of the young person, and often the young person with additional support needs or a significant trauma background than we do of ourselves. In that, I suppose the quote of "I've always done it like this" and is something that we need to challenge in organisations to actually what happened here, what could I do differently next time? Because we want the best outcome. What would we prefer to happen? We don't want young people becoming anxious, dysregulated, distressed. Because we know the impact of that on the young person, but we also know the impact of that on, if we've got a class or we've got a group of people who are supporting, the impact is so significant. So we want to try and put things in place ourselves that will support that and provide the best possible support. Also develop the skills of the young person, because we want to withdraw. We want to slowly, we obviously want to slowly withdraw the level of support that we provide and provide that that framework for self-management skills. If I feel like this, what is it I can do? What are my strategies when I'm feeling a little bit anxious? So that we get the best possible outcomes, build independence, all of those things that are really, really important for quality of life of the individual.
And that's our our goal, isn't it? Where we're helping to build, I don't know, build is the right word, but
Mm.
develop maybe
Mhm.
individuals that can thrive in society. And the skill that
Yeah,
we're
absolutely.
talking about is, I think,
Yep.
so key in it. And I
Mhm.
suppose I'm wondering about the behavior support plan part of the topic, where we
Yep.
have these conversations and sometimes they're quite informal. I know in my
Mm.
service, we sometimes it would be quite informal. And I know we're not always very good at the next bit, which would be,
Yeah.
okay, we've had this chat. This young person, student, has come up with some really great ideas of the things that
Yeah.
would help them. And then it goes off into the ether somewhere or stays in
Yeah.
someone's mind and doesn't appear anywhere else. Yeah,
Mm.
so I was wondering about those parts and the things that you've done in your career to kind of turn those conversations into the rehearsal part and the
Yeah.
repeating and learning that new skill.
Yeah. I'm before I talk around this, Claire, I certainly want to acknowledge the people that I've worked with in the past. So, I've gathered experience and expertise from some fantastic practitioners around supporting young people. Certainly in my special school experience here on the Sunshine Coast, just some amazing people with some, amazing um, relationships and practices. So certainly, I can talk around what from a. I'll talk probably most recently from a special school principal perspective,
Hmm.
how we supported students.
Yeah.
I suppose it's around giving that student that voice, and it's really important that we can provide voice for our students. One, in the development of any behaviour support plan. Obviously, the development of any behaviour support plan comes on the back of maybe some complex presentations, and certainly,
Mm.
um, generally regarding safety as well, the safety for the individual. So how do we provide that voice, and with the additional need of, some of our, there's a large percentage of students, especially with significant disability, who will need really significant support around communication. In that, we've got
Hmm.
students who have got very limited verbal communication, so making sure that we use communication systems to support
Mm.
where we can, to make sure we provide a voice for our students. So the development of the behaviour support plan, obviously multidisciplinary team, student where we can, parents, guardians, gathering all that really rich information from a range of people. I suppose over time, from a special school perspective, providing that voice after an incident was a real challenge for us, and so
Mm.
um, the use of that restorative conversation. And the restorative conversation doesn't always need to be for a smaller, for a, maybe a minor disagreement, or a smaller incident, that
Hmm.
it can be a 30-second conversation of, what happened, how are you feeling, what could we do next time, let's give that a go and we'll see how we go. So that can be walking back on the playground or to the classroom from a school perspective. The more
Hmm.
formalized, what we used, and this worked really nicely for us, is how do we provide that post-incident learning for our students, who needed maybe some of that additional support, and it really needed to dig down into some of those social, maybe some of those social complexities and those social fallouts that happen fairly regularly. So we use the system of like a visual
Mm.
debrief, a visual post-incident support. We used cartoon debriefing with our students,
Uh-huh.
which worked really nicely. A significant number of young people that we supported had ASD, and those
Hmm.
social conventions didn't come naturally, and required a little bit of support around that. So
Hmm.
that opportunity for us to visualize, or for the young person to visualize what had happened, and we just facilitated that conversation. So it obviously wasn't us saying, this happened and then this happened. It was, okay, talk to me, where were you, what happened, who was there, what were you thinking? And that opportunity to look at what you were thinking, what did you say, what did you do, provided some real clarity for us as staff members, but certainly for the
Hmm.
young person, that um maybe what I was thinking and what I said were two totally different things. So then we could identify some real barriers or some real key components to actually what happened during an incident or during an issue. And then it went to the planning phase around, okay, so this is what you did, this is what you're thinking, this is what you said. And it's more of that facilitation from the adult perspective to, okay, what's the plan for next time? The plan for next time. If this happens again, what are you going to do? What are you going to say? And provided us that real opportunity to do some role play around that, to make some visual plans. We used some 5-point scales for our students around, if it led really nicely. If this happens, this is what you can do. This is what we can do to help you support it. But again, building those self-management skills so that the level of support can be decreased over time. So that worked really nicely for us. And then obviously the second part to that was, how do we provide that reflection to staff as well in a supportive culture? Nobody, my belief is that nobody deliberately makes mistakes or deliberately, says or does something that can cause dysregulation or escalation for a young person. But how do we do that in a supportive way so it's not a blame culture for the student, it's not a blame culture for the staff member? Because if it is an incident, then the student needs some support afterwards around what we're going to do next time, some support around that depression, that anxiety after an incident, that shame, like you said, Claire. But the staff member does as well. How do we provide that support for our staff member? How do we provide that culture where seeking help or receiving some assistance and help is that character building, that strength building, that skill building process, so that if it does happen next time, the student knows what they're going to do or what the plan is for next time. The staff members know exactly what's going to happen next time, what we're going to say, what we're going to do, and we can practice those things and we can role play those things initially to lead to a more successful outcome for next time. That's not to say that every time it worked perfectly every time, and it is a process. So we used to keep those reflective, those visual, those cartoon conversations, so that if something similar happened next time, we can then reflect. Oh, last time, in the plan you said you were going to do this, and it identified those bits that person was finding real difficulty in implementing themselves. So it identified those things that we might need a little bit more work on that. It could be a visual, it could be a social story, it could be something to support that proactively to prevent those things happening in the future. Build those skills for the individual, and then build those skills around that wraparound support for those for those young people with the staff who were supporting them. So and that worked really, really effectively for us. And it just provided that process for that constant tweaking of plans. So we might need to change your plan. We might need to give you a few, support you in developing some additional strategies when you're feeling anxious or when you're requesting to join in a game, and it made it really specific for those individuals. So it, like you said, it wasn't a one size fits all. Or when this happens, in schools we use terminology of universal strategies and tier 3 strategies, so on and so forth. But again, that opportunity to look at the individual, what the presentation looked like, especially when they were in different stages of distress, but make it really, really personal for that student as well, and provide those constant feedback loops through that restorative practice process.
Yeah, because what's kind of jumping out for me is, and I don't kind of hear it, I think that often, is the word that came to me was like the honing of it. So, okay, we've got these, restorative, not restorative cartoons, but, strict conversations. Actually, we see a theme. Okay, we're going to hone that. We're going to really kind of nail things down so we kind of know the kind of themes and difficulties that person is having. And for me, that's the bit that really kind of stands out with that model, where it's not a finished product like done in one. It's kind of this ongoing fluid process that takes a really long time to kind of find those points and kind of hone it to the skills that you need the student or young person to have.
Oh, absolutely. And like any of us, things change every day. Things change within every day. And that's and I think again, when we talk around compliance, that moving away from that compliance around paperwork, yeah, we've got a behaviour support plan in place. Yeah, set and forget. We'll review that in 6 months' time. The restorative process or the reflective process allows us to edit those as we go, and it is like I'm always a great believer, and I've said it already today. The journey is the most important part. The end result is the end result, and yeah, it's nice when we've got a finished product. But the reality is that finished product could change within 24 hours, and because lives change and things change, and for the young people who we're supporting. So yeah, having that set process following, maybe an incident or an issue, provided us that opportunity just to tweak those plans all the time. So that might not be working for you. At the moment, we might need to, and you can review the strategies at each stage as well. So you didn't walk away this time. Oh no, I found that really. Oh well, maybe we need to take that as a strategy, and maybe we need to move that to requesting support or requesting help from a staff member. So that we haven't just got strategies in there that worked 6 weeks ago, that worked 2 months ago, to ones that are going to work today or tomorrow or the next day, because that's the real critical part.
Yeah, I think that's so valuable about updating plans and making sure that things work today, not what worked yesterday, what kind of works in the here and now. So thank you so much for that. And then I just wondered if you had 3 top tips to finish the episode.
Having a clear process of post-incident, what happens post-incident, I think that's really critical. And that's not always just a process-driven process, but more of a culture-driven process. What is it following an incident that we want to achieve? How are we going to improve that for next time? I think that the restorative, like I said, that's the bit that often gets missed, and certainly in my leadership experience, I've certainly that bit that came last, and we often miss those bits. We had the strategies in place for supporting students through different stages of a crisis, but it came more of, like you said, Claire, what are we going to do in this situation if this is happening as adults, as staff members? 2, I think it probably leads on from the first one, developing that culture of your organization that you're working, so that building your knowledge of your staff around some of the models around functions of behavior, some of your models around cycles of influence are really, really critical. I think so. Building that knowledge and skills of your staff. Somebody on one of my courses that I ran talked around the importance of that post-incident learning and the opportunity to provide that opportunity for young people to say what happened, and for us not to assume what happened and try and say this is what you need to do next time. And she said, in our school, we talk about not being a self-esteem thief, because that's the learning and that's the building of the self-esteem for those young people to say, oh, actually, next time I can do this. And because when you see those students or young people develop those skills and navigate through really complex situations, often social situations, the level of pride in that they get for themselves, and the skills that we're supporting them to develop for that lifelong learning, for that engagement in the community as independently as possible, they're vital skills. The impact if those skills are not supported to be developed is social isolation. That inability to engage with groups, and just being supported by people who are paid to support you. That's the quality of life gets impacted so significantly. So it's worth the time. Because otherwise we'll be dealing with exactly the same presentations, time after time, and that's when it becomes really, really challenging. How do we look to improve those things over time? So.
Yeah. And investing that time is, really the key message from the episode today. But I wanted to thank you, Richard, for your time today. Much appreciated, and hopefully catch up with you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Claire. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Team Teach podcast. It's been great to have you here with us as we discuss behaviour, communication, and the ways we can best support those in our care. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.